The cold streets of South Jamaica, Queens, echoed with the distant hum of sirens and bass-heavy beats leaking from cracked windows. Curtis Jackson, better known to a few by his stage name 50 Cent, sat alone in a dimly lit basement studio. His hoodie was soaked with sweat, not from fear, but from the desperation of a dream he refused to let die. "How many times can a man fall before he stays down?" he whispered to himself, staring at the empty notepad in front of him. He had written rhymes since he was a teenager. But now, at 25, after surviving a near-fatal shooting and burying friends to the streets, the dream of making it big in the rap game felt like a cruel joke. Record labels? They said he was too dangerous. Money? He had none. Hope? It was fading fast. Until she walked into the corner bodega. She wasn't flashy, no designer clothes, no expensive makeup, but something in her presence made time slow down. Her name was Nia, and in a world full of chaos, she looked like peace. Curtis bumped into her by accident, literally. His notebook fell to the ground. She picked it up, glanced at the lyrics scribbled inside, and smiled. "You write music?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Try to." She handed back the notebook. "Then don't stop. Somebody out there needs your words." That moment lit a fire in Curtis. He didn't know it yet, but that one encounter with Naya would inspire the song that would change his life and echo through speakers across the world. That night, Curtis couldn't sleep. Nia's words played on loop in his mind. Somebody out there needs your words. In a world that had always tried to silence him through bullets, poverty, and rejection, someone had finally told him to speak. He opened his notebook again, but this time the pen moved with purpose. "I got scars on my soul, not just my skin." He wrote about pain, about betrayal, about survival. But he also wrote about her, about the light she carried and how even in a 15-second conversation, she reminded him who he used to be. By morning, he had something more than a verse. He had a story, a track, a piece of truth that was raw and untouchable. He called it Many Men. But this version wasn't just about street vengeance. It was about rising above the dirt they buried him in. He recorded it using borrowed equipment in a friend's basement studio held together by duct tape and faith. As the beat dropped and his voice flowed, something changed inside him. He wasn't just rapping. He was healing. The track spread like wildfire, first through neighborhood phones, then onto underground mixtapes. "Many men wish death upon me." The hook haunted people. It wasn't just a song, it was a cry for survival. Local DJs played it in clubs without even knowing who Curtis really was. The rawness, the pain, it resonated. But something else happened too. Naya heard the track. One late night, as she sat in her bedroom scrolling through a friend's mixtape blog, she clicked the link. The moment the beat dropped and his voice spilled out, her breath caught. She knew those words. She felt them. And she remembered that night outside the diner. The man with tired eyes. The man she told, "Somebody needs your words." She DM'd the uploader. "Who is this? I need to talk to him." The message eventually reached Curtis. When he saw her name, he froze. "Meet me where it all started," her message read, and so he did. Back outside that same diner, the air thick with memory, Curtis stood waiting. And when Nia stepped into the streetlight, he smiled for the first time in months. "Your words lit the spark," he said softly. Nia nodded. "But you built the fire." Curtis left that night with more than a smile. He left with a mission. But the music industry wasn't handing out miracles. He walked into studios that barely acknowledged him, sent demos that were never opened, got promises from producers that vanished by morning. He was just another name in a sea of hopefuls. But one thing had changed. He wasn't alone anymore. Nia believed in the track. She pushed it. She shared it. She told anyone who would listen, "This is the voice of the street. This is what truth sounds like." It wasn't just hype. It was testimony. Curtis started performing at open mics, grimy basements where sound systems crackled, and the crowd stared blankly. But every time he spit that verse, "I'm the voice of pain" turned promise, a few more people looked up. A few more heads nodded. One night, after a show in a dusty Harlem lounge, a man approached him. "Your music saved my brother's life," he said, handing Curtis a burned CD. "You don't know it yet, but you're already doing more than selling songs. You're healing people." Those words stuck. And for the first time, Curtis realized something. He wasn't chasing fame. He was building legacy. Weeks passed. Curtis was everywhere and nowhere, sleeping on friends' couches, eating once a day, and pouring every ounce of strength into his craft. But still, the industry kept its doors shut. Until one morning, a notification. "Your track Echoes of Pain has been added to Underground NYC playlist." Nia's relentless effort had paid off. One share led to another, then another. The track started climbing. Not on Billboard, not yet, but in hearts. Comments flooded in. "I felt this in my soul. This man's been through what I've been through. Curtis speaks for us." Then came the call. A small label, indie, gritty, but real, offered him a single deal contract. No glitz, no promises of jets and chains. Just studio time and a mic. Curtis didn't hesitate. He recorded with a fire that could melt steel. Verse after verse, he bled truth into the beat. And on that final take, as he stood in the dim studio booth, he looked through the glass at Nia. She smiled, eyes filled with quiet pride. And he knew. He hadn't just recorded a song. He had recorded his rebirth. That track? It would become the anthem of thousands. But to him, it would always be the echo of a single moment. A broken man, standing in front of one woman, choosing not to give up. The night his first official track dropped, Curtis sat in silence. No parties, no champagne. Just his headphones, Nia beside him, and the city humming outside the window. By dawn, everything had changed. Streams, 100, then 1,000, then 10,000. Mentions on underground blogs. An Instagram repost from an A-list rapper. Raw, real, reminds me why I started. But beyond the numbers, something deeper shifted. Strangers began stopping him on the street. Not for photos, but for conversations. "Your song made me call my dad after 10 years. I was gonna end it. Then I heard your verse." Thank you, Curtis realized. He had become a voice. Not for fame, but for pain, for healing. Then came the second call, from a major label this time. "We want to talk, serious talk, big stage, bigger reach." Curtis hung up, not out of fear, but clarity. He turned to Nia. "I don't want to be owned. I want to build." She nodded. Then we build. That night, on a rooftop in Queens, with just the skyline and each other, they drafted the blueprint of something greater than stardom, an independent label, a creative home for underheard voices, a movement, not just music. And for the first time since that hospital room, Curtis felt it. Not hope, but purpose. Curtis sat in the studio alone. In front of him, just a mic and a blank track. But in his heart, the words were already written. He thought of her, Eva. The woman who told him, "Sing for the broken ones. They're listening, even if they can't speak." He pressed record. His voice came out low at first, trembling, but with every verse he grew stronger. He told their story, not just his rise, but how she gave him the courage to try. The song dropped. In hours, it went viral. But the only message that mattered was, "I heard it. I remember. Thank you, Curtis." Eva. That night during his live show, he spotted her in the front row. "I didn't write this to be famous," he said. "I wrote it because one person believed in me when I didn't." The crowd went silent, then applause. But all Curtis could hear was her voice, years ago, saying, "Keep going." And this time he did. The people who lift you when you're invisible, they're the real reason you shine. 50 Cent.